The beauty of all of this is I have spreadsheets for everything.
Yeah.
I will build a model. It's gonna spit out whatever it spits out, and then my wife is gonna tell me what we're gonna do.
Yeah, your
And
model doesn't matter at all. You're buying a house.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Now I finally get to open my Pop-Tarts.
tell
On
me the
camera.
brown. Tell me it's brown
On mic.
sugar.
No, strawberry.
Classic.
And look, these are healthy Pop-Tarts. These aren't real Pop-Tarts. These are Nature's Path organic Pop-Tarts. So like so much better for you.
That's not even a Pop Tart. Does that mean instead of 12 days of sodium, it has 3 days of sodium?
I think like 6, 7.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Before we hop into the fishbowl, I'm going to do one small update. China Mobile was crazy this week.
Yeah, wait, do you still own it? That was actually the one thing on my agenda. I forgot about China Mobile.
No, I don't. So here, what I mentioned last time we talked was that I'm just going to like see it through because it's a small percent. I'm just curious as to like what it's going to do. So that was my plan. And then Monday morning, I logged in to just take a look at what was going on because I was curious. I was like, this thing could drop 30%. I have no idea, but I'm curious as to what could occur. So it was down like 5%, which wasn't as much as it probably should have been, given that it was going to be delisted, but alas. And the reason I sold was because when I logged into my brokerage account, I put in CHL, the ticker, and it said not found. And I was like, what? And so then the only way I could get to it was to go into my, like, this is not a lot of effort, but to go into my portfolio, click into it, and it said like cannot be traded. And so I kind of went, okay, I'm gonna get rid of it because I don't even know what's happening right now, right? Like so anyway, so I sold it, right? Then there's the reversal of the New York Stock Exchange saying we're not going to delist it. So then it goes back up about 10%. Then the New York Stock Exchange forgot what it said the day before and came out and said, actually, we will delist it. So it goes back down. That was the last that the NYSE said, right? Then yesterday, it goes up 5%, which is just confusing. Like it's only like how's anyone clamoring into a stock that is going to get delisted in 3 days?
I think you're smarter than this. Like, okay, you know what happened this week? I'll get the name wrong, and I should. As I said before, we're light on fact checks on this podcast, but this is actually true. There's a stock called Signal, I think, that Elon Musk was pitching, and people went and bought the wrong ticker and sent something up like, I don't know, 50%. That isn't even the tip that Musk was giving them. People are not rational. This happens all the time. So why exactly China Mobile's up on Friday? I don't know, but I'm not surprised by it.
Well, so there's one, yes, with Signal. With one, I'm gonna fact check you for one moment there. Everything qualitative you said about Signal is true.
Yeah.
However, it actually went up 1,100%.
There we go.
It went up 12x in 2 days.
I was trying to underestimate it. I would.
Yeah. Like 50% would be okay. Some people like got in. And the same thing happened when Zoom went public. Like I remember that as well. Yeah. So I get that. Stocks go up when people buy it, right? I mean, that's the way. I just going out to brass tacks. Stocks go up when people buy it. In 3 days, and really just one business day. Like I'm counting the weekend here. So in 3 days, no one will be allowed to buy it. So you're trading on. So it's going to be over the counter. So It's not that no one will be. However,
actually, no, that's the hypothesis here. So if I had done like a true quantitative analysis and felt there was value there, I don't really care where it's traded. Like over the counter could be just fine. And actually, in some ways, over the counter is a little more. It's not better, but you can argue that there's advantages because it's a little less crazy. So that could be the whole reason it's up 5%. People see some advantages of going to OTC.
That's interesting because that does get me thinking. So it right now it's at roughly a 6 to 7% dividend yield. Assuming that I don't know, assuming that stays the same, right? And it's
It,
already does it not? I don't know how that
no,
works.
that should be the same.
Okay, so if that's the same, it's already relatively low volume stock, like in the U.S. at least.
In the
It's a
US.
small percent, so it's relatively low volume. If you assume that over the counter it gets even less volume, then are you just saying this is basically going to roughly stay at the same price and I'm going to get a guaranteed 6 to 7%? Are people that smart? Or are we going back to the Zoom and Signal purchasers?
So if you feel like the financials are sturdy enough to keep the dividend, you don't have to worry about the dividend with over the count. Like, it doesn't matter where it's traded. If they've committed to pay that dividend, they should continue to pay that dividend, right? The price movement, it's not necessarily the price isn't going anywhere. The price can go up 300%, down 300% OTC, right? Like it still trades. It's just going to be less traded. And I know, because I'm a small value guy, like I know a bunch of people that trade OTCs all the time. There's some people that only target OTCs, and you just have to be smarter about how you trade it. You just have to have like stop orders and limit orders in to say, what's the current price of the stock?
It's about 27.
I mean, so you could have a sell order in at 45, and you might just have that in all the time, and you might wake up one day like 2 years from now and someone might buy it at 45, and you can do the reverse on the flip side. But yeah, it's just a much less liquid market, but otherwise it's similar. Like, it's not the same. I'm not saying OTC is a great thing, but it's not the death of the stock either. I mean, this is like 2010, 2011, but I think I made a ton of money on Freddie Mac, and I think it was OTC. OTC shouldn't really scare you away if you still love the stock.
I thought it was a good investment on, as we talked about, 5G, and with its dividend yield, and I thought it had some price upside. Love would be aggressive. All right, so now let's dive into the fishbowl. You ready?
Yes.
The first item in the fishbowl is going to be a little bit of a quiz for you. Okay?
I love it.
Okay, a little bit of a quiz. So I think you're familiar. Forbes comes out with a list of the world's richest people, right? The billionaires list comes out every year, right? Are you familiar with this?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. It's been coming out for 35 years. So this is going to be the 35th one that's about to hit the bookshelves in a couple months now. Magazine shelves, whatever, the internet, whatever it hits. So it started in 1987. Question number 1. How many people have been at the number 1 ranking on this list since 1987?
In 35 years? 7. Okay, well, so Gates, Musk, Bezos.
Hold on. No. Now you're going ahead. You're going ahead because my second question was going to be how many of them can you name? But it's 6.
Yeah.
You actually were pretty close, but I still give you an eh.
I think that's ridiculous. I was so close. And then hold on, I'm not done naming them.
Hold on. So go back. I'm going to see how many of the 6. How many of the 6?
Gates, Musk. Although I don't know if they're giving Musk credit yet because that just happened. Buffett, Bezos, some dude from India one time, and that's all I got.
Okay, so you got a couple.
Oh, come on.
Which was disappointing, to be frank. So there have been 6, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because Elon Musk just this past week went from last year's list. I think he was like around number 25 in the world, and he just passed Bezos to be number 1. However, you have to remember that this is not like who is number 1 at any point in time throughout the year. It's when they like on the list, when they publish it, who's number 1. There have been 6 people. This is 1987 when they first came out. So tell me what country you believe the first 2 are from.
I mean, is it like a Russian oligarch or something? I don't know.
Man,
87?
This is just you hurt my investor soul is what you do.
Come on.
1980s. What was happening in 1987 in the global markets?
Man, crashes. I don't know.
Yeah, what was crashing?
Black
what was
Friday.
All right. So this is a little history lesson, which I thought was going to be just for our listeners, but apparently is also for one of our hosts as well.
I
So
mean, you
what
know
was
how
rip
old I am in
roaring?
1987?
So basically, there was in the 1970s, right? We had stagflation, a lot of the oil crisis
Yeah.
situation, a lot going on in 1987, or sorry, in the 1970s. However, in the 1970s, there was one market in the world that was going rip roaring, and that also continued through the 1980s,
Is that
and then
some sort of commodity?
and then fell apart in the late 1980s, and that is Japan. And the Japanese real estate market specifically, when you get into the late 1980s, was like out of control. Like a Now, do not fact check any part of this, but 1 inch of Tokyo was worth all of Manhattan
Okay,
at
this
that
is
point in
what.
time.
No, but this is brilliant because this is one of the things that we're going to talk about today, or maybe next week. Like when you talk about the inflated market hypothesis in the U.S. right now, you have Japan to look at, and what happened to Japan in the late '80s, and then how the stock market did nothing. Well, there's a strategy that worked in Japan that entire time that will work in the U.S. in coming years. That's going to crush it. So I love that you
Can
brought
we
up
get back to
Japan.
this? Can we
Yeah,
get
we
back
can
to
get
this?
back to
Because
it.
I want to hear about this. Add it to the fishbowl.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. So the first two were Japanese. They were Japanese real estate people. I'm gonna butcher these names, but Yoshiaki Tsutsumi was the first. Takichiro Mori was the second. So those are the first two.
How much
Then
time have you spent in Tokyo? That's an amazing pronunciation, dude.
as you can tell by that, I spent actually, I was going to say zero time in Tokyo. But if you count a layover that I had at Narita Airport at one point, I've spent a few hours.
That counts. I'm going to Tokyo this year as soon as I get my vaccine. So,
Are you going to the Olympics?
no, actually, I might not go to Tokyo if it coincides with the Olympics. Hopefully, after that nonsense.
You don't want that this year.
No.
You do not want that. All right. So this is the first two. Then you got Gates, and Gates was basically he ran that list from 1995 until 2008.
Yeah.
So he was on top of the list for 13 years. Then you get Warren Buffett, who had it for 1 year.
Yep.
So he had it for 1 year. The crash then took out Berkshire Hathaway stock effectively. And then you had this is one that once you hear it, you're gonna go, oh yeah, how did I miss this? Then you have my boy, you ready? My boy
Your boy.
Carlos Slim, then came in for a hot minute. You remember that?
So that's the dude that is he like what's his story? Because he has some massive monopoly somewhere in the
He
world.
owned Mexico.
Yeah.
I think his number one holding, I think, was called like America Mobile or something like that. Was a cell phone
That's
company.
right. No, that sounds right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Carlos Slim had it for a hot minute. Then he gave it back to Gates for a bit. So Gates has held this for the most amount of time, 17 years in total, I think, or more, something like that. So he's held it for the most amount of time. He gave it back to Gates. Then you got our current reigning champion of Jeff Bezos, who's had it since like 2017. Yeah. So if Musk can hold on to this spot, i.e., if the Tesla bubble like continues to build for another couple months, we'll have our seventh, and then you'd be correct. So I don't know if you're a soothsayer or a QAnon shaman or what. However, if you have him stick it out for 2 more months, then you'll have your number 7, and you'll also be right with Musk. We shall see.
Very few of those people like did it in a way that I'd want to emulate. Well, one, I don't want to be that wealthy, just like I don't want to be the president of the US and everything else. But like Musk it's a lotto ticket. I mean, I'm not claiming that the guy isn't, I don't know, smart or something, but I'm not trying to emulate pretty much anything he does.
When you say lotto ticket, what do you mean there?
He is personally worth more than ExxonMobil, the company, right? ExxonMobil, which used to be Standard Oil, which was ExxonMobil in its history. If you do that list instead of stocks, like ExxonMobil or Standard Oil is one of the dominant players of the last 120 years in the world stock market, right? The value of Tesla is not anywhere close. I mean, it's not even in the ballpark. It's not even 10x of what the true value of that company is.
Oh, you're talking inflation adjusted if you look at Standard Oil back in the day? Is that what you mean?
No. So sorry, I'm talking multiple concepts there. One, current market cap of ExxonMobil is less than Elon Musk's personal wealth. So that's point one. Set that aside. Two, how Musk is worth that much is simply because people are freaking crazy and they have no idea about the true value of Tesla. They're off by at least a factor of 10 in my eyes. And it will come down and crash. And I freaking hate that for the indexing I do in some retirement accounts, I actually was forced to buy Tesla at 10 times more value than it's actually worth. And I'm going to ride that crash all the way down. It pisses me off. Bezos is less of a lottery ticket, but Bezos and even Gates, both very smart people, and I think Gates is incredibly impressive and admirable. Bezos, I think that can be debated, but I don't think Bezos is an evil dude like some other people we know. But so Bezos, right? He's a quantitative investor. He worked at D.E. Shaw, and you might know more of the background than me, so fill this in. But the reason he started Amazon, you're the history dude. I'm sure you know all this, so fact check me here. He didn't like books or anything. He was like, hey, I see this problem, and there's 3 million books that people want to consume, and no physical bookstore can hold that. So books is a perfect place for me to build my online empire, right? And so he starts in books, and then he does everything else. He's incredible with capital allocation, which is what a CEO should do, and he's been rewarded for that by being the world's richest person. He's incredible at building a company. The people I know that work at Amazon don't always love it. Like, it seems pretty cutthroat as a culture, but that's another side. So Bezos might be the most calculated. He's more calculated than Gates in terms of, I want this massive, incredibly valuable company. And with that comes personal wealth, I think. So Bezos deserves a lot of credit. And it's not like Musk is like, I'm a big idea guy, and it just so happens that I'm gonna fool people who don't know better into thinking that my company's way more valuable than it actually is. Bezos is not that, right? Bezos, it's a very calculated plan, and he's done an incredible job growing Amazon. But you don't create a company that's the largest in the world or in the top tier without some luck and some lotto ticket aspects to it, right? There's not a formula there, regardless of your passion and desire, that says, I can make a company that's bigger than Walmart, ExxonMobil, everyone else, right? Does that make any sense?
No, but that's okay. There are aspects of it. There are aspects of it I get. The lotto ticket concept, I think, is what I was really saying no to, because I think that if you, he's been building this company for 25 years, and it's hard to say lotto ticket over that period of time. I think the concept that there's no formula for it is, if you're saying, if you don't have a formula, therefore it's lotto ticket, then sure, then every entrepreneur that's ever existed that has built any company that's worth anything, it's a lotto ticket. I can't agree. I can't agree to that.
I know very few entrepreneurs that turned into something like a publicly listed company that aren't crediting luck to a significant portion of that. So yeah, maybe lotto ticket is the wrong terminology, but Bezos, Gates, Musk, to a certain degree, built great companies, and they built great companies because of the people in those companies. And I'm just saying chance played a component. Now, and I'm trying to articulate that Amazon and Microsoft are a different beast than Tesla when you talk about the world's greatest, richest person.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. And I also, on the luck concept, I think luck is really interesting. And we talked about Jim Collins 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever he had the Tim Ferriss podcast. He has this concept that's the return on luck, which is not, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's not complicated, but it's like, there are certain people that have a higher return on luck than other people, right? Bad luck or good luck. And I think that's a fascinating concept. And in the business of entrepreneurship and building companies, if you do it over a sustained period of time, you have to have a high return on luck, because there's so much that can kill you. So fully get that. Cool. We did the richest people thing. I think it was interesting. It took me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so I thought it'd be interesting to bring up. Yeah. The number 2 thing, and I told you that I didn't want recent news to be a thing that we focused around. However, can we talk about Jack Ma?
I've seen the headlines, and I'm a little out of the loop on Jack Ma. You'll fill me in.
So for those that don't know, Jack Ma is he's the former CEO, founder of Alibaba, a Chinese company that owns nearly every type of business you can think of. You can think of it as a little bit of like the Amazon of China in some ways, because they just have so many different types of businesses in it. Like they have Alipay, which is financial services. They have like an eBay type, Amazon type product, etc. Anyway, incredibly wealthy individual. Apparently, no one has seen him since October. So what happened in October is, and this ties back, if you want to full circle it, right? As my girl Missy once said, put your game down, flip it, and reverse it. If you take this back to the China Mobile conversation, back in October, the largest IPO of all time was about to occur in Ant Group, right?
Yeah.
Very big financial organization. Jack Ma is a significant investor in Ant Group. He was giving a talk to, I can't remember, some group, and basically said that Chinese regulation needed to slow down. They need to calm down, right? Get off your soapbox. Stop with the horse collaring. I don't know what any of those phrases mean, but I'm going to use them. He said all of this about the Chinese government. Chinese government did not like it. They called him into their special quarters.
Yes.
Next thing you know, Ant Group no longer has an IPO, and apparently no one has seen Jack Ma.
Yes, this is so great. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. Like, is he locked up? Probably. Can we say that?
I'm gonna
You think
not
he's
say that that's the
dead?
case. I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt here. So here's my hypothesis. Although this has many holes, right? My hypothesis is that what happened actually was I don't think the Chinese government kidnapped him. I don't think he's in a holding cell. I don't think they took him out. I think what happened was he ran his mouth off. They said, you have got to, like, we're gonna go and we're gonna do a bunch of investigating into like your companies, right? And make sure that they're not doing stuff that we don't agree with. During that time, zero out of you. I don't want people to know that you are alive. If you open your mouth, we will shut you down, because they can. I mean, they can basically.
But that's way too rational. That's not the Chinese government. Oh, hey, we're going to do some investigating and be a good boy. No, it's like, that's not how things work over there.
Okay, we're going to get into your Chinese politics expertise right after this. However, I do think that this plugs in to our prior conversation a little bit, because he is the Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates of China. And it just, like, independent. This I'm not talking about, Putin, right? Who says, like, if we wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead.
Yeah.
I think China is a bit of a different beast than that right now. I think they're too much on the world circuit to take out their Bill Gates. Like, that feels, I could be wrong. And like, if I am wrong, che presa, or whatever they say in Italy.
So if you're wrong, yeah, I mean, all that will happen is you'll be fired from the podcast. But I disagree, actually. I think I read something a while back, or I read some speculation. There was, in addition to the criticism of the Chinese government that never goes over well in China, he was also thought as like the Bill Gates of China, and they weren't really a fan of that perception. Like, they don't really want to be a place where you think your average citizen thinks you can become the world's greatest entrepreneur and one of the richest people and most powerful people in the country. I believe they think those spots should be reserved for people in the government. I don't know. It's very interesting. I'll have to check out some of the speculation these days.
We'll see. We shall see. The truth's going to come out, and what's going to happen is we're just going to learn that Jack Ma decided to retire and just trade China Mobile and OTC.
No, listen, the truth is not going to come out. This is why I don't own Chinese stocks. You can't even trust the financials, in my opinion. So I'm not going to trust the news about Jack Ma necessarily. Like, they'll put out some story with a pretty picture of him drinking tea or something and claim that he's the world's happiest man, and he could still be in the holding cell.
Fishbowl number 2, done.
I liked it.
I'm going to dip into my personal fishbowl right now. So we talked, like a decade or so ago, about my thoughts on buying a house.
Oh,
right?
Did we ever? And I can't believe you remember that conversation, but I remember that conversation.
Broadly speaking, I'm not even going to revisit exactly what we talked about there, but what I will say is I have about, I'd say 6 to 8% interest in owning a house. My wife has 115% interest in owning a house. So needless to say, in about 5 hours, we're going to be looking at houses. Now, the question that because I go into rabbit holes. I go down rabbit holes, and it fits into, generally good investments, bad investments, etc. So I've started going down this route of the rent versus buy,
Yep.
thing. And so the question that I want to pose to you for you to like then kick this conversation forward is, should I buy a house as an investor?
It's really important that you give like just a 2-minute background on why you've been adverse to it or why you've hesitated so far. Because I bought my first house when I was 22, 23. And so that's been a staple. That's been part of my investing life, right? It was just something I didn't even really, growing up, I didn't really know anyone that didn't own a house. So it was like just what you did. But so, yeah, give a little background there, and then I'm going to kill you with thoughts on this.
Okay. So macro background, I'll say, is I'll talk about a thing that I like and a thing that I dislike. I have on the dislike column, I have an aversion toward debt. So the conversation we had 10, 12 years ago was, if I'm going to buy a house, I want to be able to buy that house in cash.
Yep.
Not that I necessarily would, right? But I would say I'll take out enough debt, but know that I can cover that debt at any moment, right? And so it'll be good for credit rating, et cetera. But I'm going to pay that off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The second thing is I have a like of a thing I like to call cash. It's partially, there's like the cash that you hold for emergencies, et cetera. But also when you think about the investments that I do like, right? I feel like I can do more with cash in the stock market than I can do in other places. And so if I'm going to be clunking down, if you take the first one, like large amount of cash is going to be dispersed to go into a house if I buy it, and what I believe that I can do with cash otherwise, as an investment, it's something that doesn't, for me, make sense to put a lot of cash into. Like I would rather put that into something else. And so that's like my macro view on why, from an investing standpoint, like a house hasn't been it. The other thing I'll say, I'll just throw in, is I know there are some people that owning a house is a thing that, like, emotionally, right, that they've just wanted to do, and I don't have that. And so I can see, even if the money doesn't play out, where if owning a house is important to you, fantastic. For me, like, I've never had that. I don't want to paint my walls lime green. I don't want to put, any paint. You look at my wall, white, right?
Yeah,
no
I got
interest.
a tree. I got a tree in my office, and
You went all out, is what you did. You went all out, is what you did.
Multiple pictures back here.
I do have a poster on the ground over here. I got a poster.
On the floor.
Yeah, on the floor, but not
I
even
want that
hung.
up the next time I talk to you. So here's
anyway,
the good news. You get the best of both worlds. There's no reason your investing life should change drastically with the purchase of a house. And interest rates are insane. So when I bought my first house, I think it was 2006. My interest rate was around 6%, which in very few times in the history of the US, like 30-year treasury, had the US treasury been, below 5%. So basically, for, a 23-year-old kid is buying a house at insane mortgage rates. This is back in 2006, as I mentioned. Today, you can get half that or less than half that. You can be talking about rates less than 3%. And as we know, a monkey throwing darts on a basic portfolio of equities can perform way more than 6% or 3%, right? Your China Mobile holding that you love so much has a 6% dividend. So the thought about taking out debt at less than 3% is an entirely different realm and conversation than it has been historically. Like, the rates are so low that I think you got to strongly consider that. But I'd like to talk a little numbersies, but they can be like really rough. I mean, these can be made up things. So let's throw out a number. I don't know if it's like $2,000. I don't know if it's more or less for current rent and what you think your mortgage might be. Again, let's just have some round numbers to talk about, because I want to articulate that I think you can do this without really any sacrifices to your investing life.
Okay, so let's just say $2,000. You name that figure. Let's
Okay.
assume it's that.
Right. So let's say you're currently paying rent $2,000. If you buy a house, would that be in the same ballpark, or would there be a step change?
For simplicity, let's just say yes.
First and foremost. And I'm gonna, let's say 500K, like that's a nice round number. Let's say that's what you're buying. Now, have you thought about 10% down, 20% down, less, more, anything in terms of cash payment there?
Well, what's been thrown at me is 20% down is what gets you out of PMI, private mortgage insurance.
Yep.
And I've heard that that's what I should aim for that. And so 20 plus is where I'm sitting, but I haven't done enough into just dipping my toe in, right? 5 hours going out in the market, which is a big deal for me. But so I haven't done a lot of research there, but I assume it's going to be 20% or more.
Okay. Yeah. So simplicity's sake, we're going to say 20% cash, 20% down. So that's the major sacrifice you're making, right? Because that money could be invested in the stock market. I'd like to look at PMI rates currently, and I'm sure you'll do this analysis at a deep dive, but this is where I think you could argue that 20% down is 100K, 10% down would be 50K. I think you could do an analysis that says, you know what, I don't mind paying PMI because the dividends on my investments of 50K are going to easily pay off my PMI and so much more.
The dividends on my delisted securities are going to pay more.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. But other than that, is that all you're talking about, that initial cash outlay? Because other than that, basically, if you're paying $2K in rent right now and you would have a $2K mortgage, for simplicity's sake, gosh, $600-700 of that would go towards paying down your debt every month. The rest would go towards paying interest, and the rest would go to taxes and mortgage insurance and whatever else, right? So the $2,000 you spend right now gets cut in half, and I know it's not exactly this way, but renting, like, the $2,000 kind of disappears. Like, there's no chance of you really seeing that again. When you're paying down a mortgage, $600 of that comes back to you every month in terms of paying off that debt. And that debt is so cheap right now that it's almost free money.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting is we're also at the lowest supply that we I don't know if it's in history, but it's in a very long time from the housing market. And so I don't know how the low debt versus higher prices actually is going to pan out. I'll figure all that stuff out and figure out the PMI. Agreed. I think that's a really interesting analysis to do. The other thing for me, and this will surprise you because of how much of a man's man I am, but the other thing that is the lifetime of inconvenience. Right now, so the situation we're in right now, our rental, amazing landlord, has so much pride in this place. When anything goes wrong, he's all over it, loves it. We have a good relationship, etc. And so I'm also thinking there's this cash outlay from an investor standpoint that feels highly uncomfortable. And then a lifetime, you don't remember Lifetime movies? I'm talking a romance
in
of
this
inconvenience.
House, we subscribe to the Lifetime movie channel. And by we, I mean my wife. But yes, I know all about Lifetime movies.
Yeah. So lifetime of inconvenience.
But that's different than the investing decision. Or at least that could be quantified, because
you're getting so fiery. You're slamming that mic. I've not seen you this fiery.
Oh, I love this stuff. So one, I'm with you, right? I hate mowing the lawn, and at the moment I have AstroTurf in my backyard, and you know how much time that's gonna free up for me every weekend. There's it's so astute of you to even consider what it means when the doorknob breaks and there's no one to call to fix it. Well, you can outsource those relationships. You can have someone that does doorknobs, paint, everything. It just costs money. And you can budget that in. And yes, that's included in your $2,000 a month for rent, but it's not going to cost you $600 a month. Per my point, that when you're paying down your own mortgage, you're coming out on top. You just don't see that immediately. Like you see that 30 years down the road. So I think you just need to build that into your model.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The beauty of all of this is I have spreadsheets for everything. I will build a model. It's going to spit out whatever it spits out. And then my wife is going to tell me what we're going to do.
Yeah, your model doesn't matter at all. You're buying a house.
It matters for my own like academic like fun times, and I don't say that in the sense of like this is not a whatever my wife says goes, happy wife happy life kind of thing, because actually she makes the best decisions for our family. Like so I think that is the way that it should work. However, but it is going to be a fun academic exercise. I don't know where it ends up going, but I appreciate going back and forth with you on it, because there are a few things that you kind of spit into my mentals. That'll be good to play with, even in the non-binary decision of yes, no, but of how much, when do we put down, how much do we put down, all that kind of stuff. I think it's good food for thought.
To the high level, like your first question, not even like a house to live, just like, well, is it a good investment? Like there's a reason I don't own like 4 rental properties, right? I think value stocks, destroy rental properties in most cases all day, every day, 24/7, 365. I've done that analysis a bunch, and I completely understand what the appeal of rental properties. I completely understand the type of person that feels that physical asset is really valuable, and there's an entirely different approach. I have a good friend growing up. Every time the stock market went down 20%, they freaked out, sold all their equities in their 401k, cursed the stock market. It never made any sense to them. They now own 6 rental properties and with the same amount of cash outlay, and it's comfortable and it feels safe. And it's like this farmer's mentality or something. Like I totally get that. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but no, if you just have cash, I think you're going to agree with me here. Like, there's ways to do it with equities where you can significantly outperform real estate. And that's why we are where we are. But in the case of you actually have to have some place to lay your head, it's not that simple anymore. It's not just about what the investment is. It's about, I have this inconvenience of having to have a place to live. Like, how do I maximize that in a way that takes in all these factors, some of which are purely financial and some of which, like you mentioned, are, I want to be able to paint the walls green. Now that's not you, but that might be people in your family, like, so there's a lot of non-financial factors when it comes to your primary residence in my eyes.
I think that's right. There's one other thing that came across in my readings, which I thought was interesting. You may say this feels obvious, but I'm going to throw it out because in this camp, I will say I am the average person when I'm just like researching all this stuff with real estate. And I thought this was fascinating, is that if you look at homeowners and where they end up from a wealth perspective at the end of their lives, and you look at non-homeowners and where they end up, homeowners crush non-homeowners. The reason being,
I know this. Go.
Can I finish?
What's the reason?
Can I finish? So the reason is not that like the value of the homes appreciated so much, and so therefore like that's like the beacon of their wealth. The reason is because of forced savings. It's because it's a mechanism where people that generally might not be saving and would be spending money they're forced to save money that they're putting into equity. And it's that forced savings like muscle effectively being built that is then it's pushed them into a place where they now almost automatically are in a place where they're going to have greater wealth at the end. I thought that was really interesting. I don't think that necessarily applies to me and my family because of how we like generally operate, but I think for the average investor, the average person, I think it's a fascinating and really like enlightening fact.
Yeah, so that's my number one talking point when I talk to people about mortgages, actually. And I didn't get there with you, but that was where I was going. So it tells you so much about the human brain and the mindset. And so some people will go to me. I get this question several times a year, like, hey, I have a bunch of extra money effectively at really cheap lending rates. Like, what should I do with that? Or like, it could be going back to the how much cash do I put down thing. Like, how much should I keep invested or how much should I put down? Well, that forced saving piece is the absolute key. So when you talk about those decisions between paying down, say, extra debt on your mortgage, right? Let's actually, this is the way to talk about it. So let's say you take out a 30-year mortgage, but you decide you really don't like debt and you want to pay that off in 10 years. So then in a year, we're going to have the debate about like, how much should I pay off versus how much should I invest, right? And that becomes, in my eyes, a forced savings conversation. It's like, well, you will probably, in all likelihood, if you're really smart about your investments, outperform by investing that in equities. But are you actually going to take the extra $500 that you had earmarked to pay down your mortgage and put it in equities and never touch it for the next 30 years? Or are you going to take that $500, put it somewhere and feel super rich and then actually spend a significant portion of that? In that case, paying down your mortgage, even at super low interest rates, probably makes more sense because of that money disappears mentally and you can never touch it again. Versus, oh my goodness, have you seen my equity account and the balance right now? Like, I want a new computer and I want a new car. I'm just going to buy that. Obviously, the second case leads you to much less wealth than the first case, even though the second case probably has a higher potential for return, right? If you could get people to do that with anything else in their life, I mean, people do that with retirement savings once they get comfortable with it. And I'm sure you've heard of Save More Tomorrow, which is a brilliant economics book. I think it's the Chicago guys. Is it Nudge, Thaler, and is that Solenstein or Cass? Whatever. I forget his last name at the moment. But
the ghost from Scrooge?
No. Does Save More Tomorrow ring a bell?
No, never heard of it.
All right. So basically, let's say you're dealing with someone who doesn't save at all for their retirement account, right? And the most financial advisors come to them and be like, you have to save between 10 and 15%. And they go, there's no freaking way. Like, I can't pay my bills as it is. Like, why? You expect me to cut my pay by 15%? No, what you do is you say, let's start small. Let's put like 3% of your salary aside. You'll probably feel it. Every year, when you get a 2% raise, we're going to take 1% of that and divert it to your retirement savings. So year 2, you go from 3 to 4, then you go to 4 to 5. A decade later, you're saving 15% ish, and you never even felt the income because you never felt that pain, right? Because you still get more in your paycheck every year. You just don't get quite as much more. You only get a 1% raise instead of a 2% raise. So all that forced saving stuff, I'll stop. But like, that is the key. If you can do that with your retirement, with your savings, with your mortgage, you're gonna be in such good shape long term.
That was the least dumb thing I've ever heard you say.